You're listening to The Dating Den with dating and relationship badass and best-selling author Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important dating, sex, and relationship issues you want to know about. So if you're ready for true talk that's authentic and unfiltered, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
The Dating Den, episode 77 with Jordan Harbinger. The real truth from a high-quality man on how you can become rejection-proof. Ladies, welcome into the Dating Den. I'm super excited to have you here. It's like if we could have like a throwback, it would be this episode because I have one of the very first ever men, a real live manimal, who is on my very first man panel that I ever did Dating with Dignity, maybe like, 5 years ago. And he's totally man-volved. So maybe he'll tell a little bit of a story. He was a single guy back then. Now he's not. So he's a man who's gone through manvolution. And he's doing a lot of things in his life around creating the life that he wants to live. He's got a lot to offer around how to deal with rejection. And also I brought him here because I wanted him to talk to you about trusting your gut and what happens when you don't trust your own gut. So with all of that, fall du raw, welcome Jordan Harbinger into the Dating Den.
Hey, thanks for having me back on the show after a long time. It's been a long time.
It's been a really, really long time. So for those of you who don't know Jordan, he is podcast famous, just so you know that. He was once referred to as the Larry King of podcasting, except younger and much better looking. He is a former Wall Street lawyer turned talk show host. He is a social dynamics expert. He's an entrepreneur. He hosted a top 50 iTunes podcast for over a decade before it was cool and everyone was doing it. So he's like an innovator. They had like 4 million downloads a month at the top of it. And then he decided to create his own new adventure, and that's called the Jordan Harbinger Show. And it's so cool. He deconstructs the playbooks of super successful people in lots of different realms, and they talk about their strategies and their perspectives and their insights, and it's a really, really cool show. So you definitely want to check that out. And he's just got a wide knowledge of a lot of things like business and just a really cool approach to teaching, and you're gonna love him. So Jordan, first of all, let's update people. So way back in the day when I first had you on the man panel, which was a group of average men who were actually more than average, and they talked about what it's like to date and the male perspective. Way back, you were single. Did you even have a girlfriend back then? I don't even think so.
I don't even know. When was this? I mean, I've dated Jen for maybe, but if it wasn't within the last 5 years, then it wasn't anybody of consequence, I guess you might say. He was
just to play in the field. And then you met she's your wife now, right?
She is my wife, yeah.
Yeah, you totally man-volved. So you met her. How long did you guys date before you got engaged?
We dated we married for a year, and we were only engaged for less than a year because I waited so long. We dated for 3+ years before getting engaged, yeah.
And this is totally, not planned, but I always want to know. So how did you know and when did you know? That this was the one? Was it love at first sight? Was it the first trip you went on? What was that?
It's funny because I really, early on, I was pretty sure, but you never know because unless you're sort of delusional, you know that your brain does things where it convinces you that, oh, this is the one. You're in the honeymoon phase. Your brain is taking a total bath in chemicals that get you to believe that everything, that you're doing is going to be forever. And this is the one. That's why there's so many people that's why they urge you, they being therapists, coaches, and sensible people, urge you not to do anything in the first 6 months to a year of a relationship because you're supposed to be in the honeymoon phase. You're supposed to be true love and carving your name into a tree and in a hot air balloon somewhere. But
that's awesome.
I knew that from teaching all this stuff and teaching this stuff for years on the other show, interviewing hundreds of neuroscientists and brain chemical folks. I was just okay, this is not a good time to make lifelong decisions. So we didn't consolidate our bank accounts, and we didn't, do much of anything like that. We ended up moving in together within the first year due to logistics, because I moved up to San Francisco from LA, and she was living in Cupertino with her parents, which is not that far, but far enough to be inconvenient, especially when there's no parking in San Francisco. So, I was like, look, why don't we basically shacked up in SF, which was fine because it was kind of like, well, this is my apartment and you live here. It's also your apartment and you live here. But if anything goes wrong, it's not like, oh, crap, I live in Missouri. Right. Where am I going to go? It would have been like, okay, I'm getting in the car and I'm going to my parents' house and I'm taking my cat. That would have been it. And so, we thought about those kinds of things. And a lot of people were like, oh, that's so unromantic, thinking about what's going to happen if you have a breakup. And I'm like, it's more unromantic being stuck with a lease that you can't afford on your own, or being out on your butt and having to couch surf in the city of San Francisco while you're trying to run a business and looking for a place to live that you can afford because that's unromantic. So logistically, we were kind of not shy about just being honest about what could happen. But obviously we weren't planning to break up and have a horrible experience out of it. But we did a lot of things in the beginning that I think were really practical like that.
That's so awesome. Yeah, it's like prenup. Get, like it's not sexy, but get one anyway.
Right.
Yeah, right. So and then you said I waited so long to propose. Is 3 years a long time for you? Did you feel like it was a long time? Were other people telling you it was a long time?
Yeah, her mom was like, what the hell? And she had found the ring that I bought, and then I was like, oh, I got to wait for her to sort of forget about this so that
that's so
surprise, so that the surprise isn't ruined. And pro tip, she's never going to forget about it. So just accept that you've been busted and like figure out a way to work with that. Because I waited and waited and waited and waited, and then it became like, did you change your mind?
Oh,
and then it was like, no, I didn't change my mind, and it's like, okay, then what's going on? Because WTF, you've had this ring for like 8 months. What's happening? And then her mom, of course, was like, maybe he's never going to marry you. And she's like, no, he has a ring. And she's like, what? He has a ring? How long has he had a ring? Oh, like 8 months. What? Oh my God, this is even worse than I thought. Now he's changing. So it was just a whole thing. And I'm like, no, don't wait that long. And if you get discovered, it's not the end of the world, And for me, I just was like, it was just like I was not prepared to be all creative with a proposal and then like have it not work out. I had no backup plan of sorts. It was just not a good situation for me it wasn't working out as I had in my head.
Right. And it's
so
high pressure for a guy, right? Like,
God,
you have to. My cousin, I'll never forget this. It was like a decade ago, and she was dating this guy. They were living together, and it was her birthday, and the same thing, right? The ring, and she was like, "All right, he's taking me out. It's like a totally random, weird place. He's totally gonna propose. It's gonna be amazing." They go to this dinner. Oh, they go to Disneyland or some like amusement park. So she's like, "Oh my God, he's doing the thing on the knee with the animals and Cinderella and fireworks," and it's raining, and they go to like a goofy restaurant, and he's like, "Oh, it's really special. I want to give you this for your birthday." And she was like, "Here it comes." And he freaking gave her a tennis racket, dude.
Wait, what?
A tennis racket. He was like, "I can't do the whole proposal thing." It was just like he felt like there was so much pressure. And so he just kept putting it off because it wasn't cool enough. I just feel like guys have this pressure, right? To have like this perfect proposal.
That is, yeah, that sounds, I mean, look, it is hard because you hear of your friend that like hired all the characters on Hollywood Boulevard to do a dance, and I'm like, aren't they all like substance abuse people? Like, how did you get them to dance? But, it's just crazy. It's a crazy situation for you because if anything goes wrong, you don't get a second chance. So it's not a good feeling.
Yeah. It's like, it's not The Bachelor. You can't wait till after the rose and make it look better the second time.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for sharing your story, by the way. So here's the deal. I was on a plane. I was listening to my little podcast thing about money called Stacking Benjamins. And Jordan, I'm like, wait, I know that guy. He's on this podcast. And you were talking about the story of and it really reminded me of dating. It's like, because you had this business, you thought it was the one, right? Mm-hmm. You were together for a long time when you didn't know any better. You didn't really choose it. You fell into it, right? It's like that relationship. And then you have this little nagging, right? Like maybe something's not right. And you shared that story and you talked about, how that evolved. And then it ultimately led into you creating your new show, right? The Jordan Harbinger Show, which is amazing. And it's your perfect match, right? For now. And so I just thought it'd be really important for you to share that. Like, what was it like for you to be in something? It happened to be your career. It wasn't a relationship, but like that evolution of like, this is great. Honeymoon's over. Is this great? And then not really trusting your gut or not following the signs. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it's really an exercise in not following the signs, because I knew so many years ago that I would eventually need to leave, but it went from, but if I leave, what else am I going to do? And the parallel to dating and relationships would be, well, if I leave, am I going to find someone else? Right.
Right.
And then you start making more money and you're like, well, if I leave, am I going to find somebody who I am as happy with as I am now? Maybe this is all there is. Maybe this is normal. Right. So cue like any tired relationship. And then later on, it started to get really bad. And I won't go into detail because there's so much litigation and legal stuff surrounding all this stuff anyway. I don't want to.
It's a high power attorney divorce.
Yeah, you don't really need to deal with that. And so then it's like, well, okay, now if I try to leave, it's like it's that situation where it's just going to be even worse. So you start rationalizing it. And everyone has that. I don't want to make a joke out of it. Everyone has that family in their neighborhood where they're like, why does that wife put up with that guy? And then, one of her friends, the only woman she talks to in the neighborhood, is like, she's afraid of him. It's like that situation. And then it's like, oh my God, that's terrible. And then when it all goes down, and like what happened with our company, where it was just like one day, we negotiated an amicable split. The split didn't happen as planned for various reasons that I won't get into. And then suddenly, not even half, 80 to 90%, whatever it is of the company ends up getting fired in like one swoop. And it's just big, giant mess. And then it's like, oh, this is awful. What am I going to do? You go through all these stages of like grief or disbelief or whatever you want to call it. And then later on, you're like, wait, this is the best thing that ever happened to me.
Well, yeah. So when you were going through and I literally can think of handfuls of clients that have had that situation, right? Where you are like, you are really scared to leave, and you do go into that doubt of what, maybe I'm being too picky, or maybe this is the best thing. And you start to look at other people who maybe have it worse. When you were in that experience of really trying to figure out what was right for you, and to get rid of all the stories. Like, what did you do? How did you get clear?
What can you clarify that? I'm not even sure that I know what you're asking me.
Yeah, well, like there's that moment where you're like, this is not what I'm really meant to do. Like there is something better for me out there. Like that moment where you have the courage to let go of this thing that you had, right? And say like, you know what? Like the truth is like, this isn't a bad thing, right? And it gave you the courage to go create something that was really right for you. So how did you get to that place when you're in the pain and the fear, and then get into that place of, you know what, this is the best thing for me? Yeah.
So actually that's a great question. So what happened at first was I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta be upset about this. And then like, a few hours later, I was like, okay, that's not going to help. So I'm done with that. And then I started to make a list of people that I could call for advice and or help. And so I started calling, of course, you call your parents, you call your close friends or whatever, and they give you emotional support, which kind of gets you a little bit more steady, but it's not real help most of the time because, they tell you like, those are the people that told you could be anything you wanted to be when you grow up, right? So they're going to be nice to you, but they're not really going to help you. And even some of the things that they say that might be helpful are not necessarily that helpful. And I think anybody who's been in a relationship and had a problem and then told their parents or some other person in their life has given them an answer where they're like, thanks. Like, right. Oh, my, this one didn't work out. It's like, hey, growing up and dying alone is not that bad. And you're like, I hate you.
Right, exactly.
You don't need that. But I made a list of people that I kind of knew would understand. So entrepreneurs that were successful and had already were in a good place and things like that. And I called a lot of them. And they were like, oh, I went through this. And so that they commiserated a little bit. And these are people that are more than okay right now. So I thought, well, good if they got through it. And then I also had some really great people that are really successful tell me things that were way, way worse than what I was going through and had turned out much, much better. You know, people who'd built up $100 million companies had no idea what was coming and then ended up just getting like tossed out unceremoniously. Whereas in my situation, when I left to do the Jordan Harbinger Show, I knew that not only was I bringing like my skill set that I'd built over 11 years, but I was bringing the entire team. I was bringing all of the network and relationships that I'd built over the last decade and change. I was not going it alone. I wasn't some basement dweller who had just kept his head down and put in his hours and hoped that somebody in upper management would notice. I was the face of the brand. I was the person who met everybody and was a brand ambassador. I did all the sales, for a long time. I did the whole show for a long time. So I made a list of beyond the first few people that I called who gave me support and were really telling me that this is the best thing that ever happened to me and I just don't know it yet. I was able to reach out to my network and say, I'm in need of help. Can you help me regrow the show? And people I don't even know have been helping and, going on different shows and showcasing and speaking elsewhere. And all of these things that I thought were going to be horrible that would happen to me didn't. Like, oh my God, all these places that booked me for speaking gigs are going to cancel. Nobody canceled. In fact, I got more. Oh my gosh, all my advertisers, what's going to happen? Well, what happened is they all came and joined the new show. Oh my gosh, my network, they're going to ditch me. Nope. They signed me to a new contract, gave me a cash advance so I could pay my bills, and promoted the crap out of the Jordan Harbinger Show in order to regrow it. And it's like, oh, but I can't pay my team. They're all going to quit. Nope. They work for half pay or they work in their spare time for free with an agreement that I'm going to pay from the hours that they've tracked eventually when things get off the ground. So like all of these nightmare scenarios that I gamed out in my head where it was like, oh, my life is over. None of those things really came to pass. And all of these things that I thought were going to be impossible, they just turned out to be hard instead.
I love what you just said. All these things that I thought were going to be impossible turned out to just be hard instead. And that, because that is the reality, right? Like breaking up, leaving, making a big transition, like let go of the fantasy that, if you do the right thing, it's going to be freaking, talk about Disney, like dinky, dinky, dink, like butterflies and rainbows. Right. But the other thing that I love that you did is you got the emotional support and then you stacked evidence on what do I have? And I think when you're looking at the reality of breaking up or leaving something, like we forget how awesome we are when we're in those relationships or situations where we're not made to feel valued or appreciated, right? We start to forget. And so I love that you like literally, and I tell my clients, write down the list. Here's all my assets. Here's what I have. Here's what I can bring to the game, and realize that it will be hard, but not impossible. That's amazing.
It's important because I think a lot of people will look at this and go, I can't believe this. Because I remember people going, hey, what would happen if you lost this or if you left this or if your company hit a hard time and went out of business or something? And I was like, I don't know. I don't even want to think about it. And then being forced to deal with it, it was like, oh, I would just rebuild it, except for I would have none of the BS that I hate on a daily basis as a part of this. I wouldn't work with so-and-so and so-and-so. And I would take these team members with me and like I would do this differently and I'd have a more mature audience and I would have a different brand, and all these things came true. And I was talking to my friend Jay Moore, who's you probably see him. Yeah. So I was talking with him and he was like, yeah, you know what though? You got everything that you wanted. You're doing your own show. You're doing your own business. You don't have to work with people that you don't want to work with anymore. Like there are so many benefits to this, and all you're doing is crying over spilled milk. And I'm like, it's true. It's tough because you think that it's going to take as long as it took the first time with a business. You're like, but it took me 11 years to build this. And people are like, yeah, because you didn't know what you were doing and you were 26. Like now you're 38. You know exactly what you're doing. You have relationships, resources. There's capital coming your way. You have a reputation in the industry. You have your team. It's not going to take you 11 years. It's going to take you like 2. And then you're going to have something better than you had before, except for you're not going to have to deal with any of the dead weight baggage, whatever you want to call it, that you had before. And I'm like, yeah, that's really true. That is absolutely the case. And it's exciting to rebuild something new that you like, instead of just like reacting to business stressors or like dealing with, oh yeah, years ago we did this thing and I'm still sort of paying the price for that. None of that stuff is anything that I have to worry about. And one of my biggest concerns was, oh man, how am I going to rebrand from the Art of Charm guy to the Jordan Harbinger Show guy, like this dating and pickup guy to this sort of like serious interviewer. How's that going to work? Well, guess what? I didn't have to worry about that because I restarted the show, and a huge amount of the audience is like, oh yeah, this is the guy who did the interviews on that other show that I used to like, and everyone else has never heard of it, doesn't care, and it doesn't matter.
So awesome. Ladies, you are all really smart. I hope you are like making all the damn parallels, right? About what it is. You're older, you're wiser, you have more assets, you have more resources. So when you are looking at that starting over, that breakup, that reinvention, right? Like there is so much possibility when you have the mind shift of what am I going to create? Because I say to all my clients, like, what would it be like if you could have it any way you want it, right? And that's kind of what you're creating, and it came out of a bunch of mess. So I love that. All right, let's talk about, because you are a social dynamics expert. Let's talk about rejection. So here's the thing. You know, first of all, I want to hear your opinion on this. I believe that rejection is really a state of mind. Like, is it possible, do you think, if you have a certain state of mind, that rather than feeling rejected, you could feel like, oh, it's not a match? Or do you think that's just sort of bullshit?
I mean, I get what you're saying, just feeling it's not a match. I think our human nature is to go, oh, well, this person doesn't like me and I liked them. But I think it is healthy to think, oh, this isn't a match. Like, you're able to like somebody and not be a fit for them. And you're plenty of people like people who are not a good fit. Those people get married and they end up going, oh my God, how did this happen? So in a way, rejection really isn't that much different, right? If you're dating somebody, you know, it's funny. I just noticed this. If you break up with somebody, and I guess you can't really say break up, but if you go out with somebody a few times and you like them and they don't really like you as much, then you feel rejected. But if you make it past the honeymoon phase and then you break up, nobody's like, oh, I feel so rejected. It's like, oh yeah, I broke up with this person I was dating. And so it really seems, rejection seems, except in the cases of severe trauma or something like that, rejection really seems to happen only in the honeymoon phase, which means that we're just sort of hung up on this other person because we want them to like us. But who cares? There are so many people that didn't like me when I was dating them. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'm a Wall Street attorney. Like, I'm in good shape. I have tons of friends. I have a healthy social circle. And I met this random person, you know, at a bar. And I'm not trying to put like judgment on people, but in a way it's kind of like, okay, well, this person works at, like, they fold towels at a gym. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not exactly the same level of accomplishment or achievement that I might have in my life as a Wall Street attorney. And they're like, yeah, sorry, you know, they're dating this like guy who plays in a band at a bar. And you're just like, what? And either you can go, I can't believe it. Why would she choose that guy over me? I feel so rejected. Or you can go, hey, this person likes pizza and I'm Chinese food right now. So some people just don't want China. You know, some people just want pizza.
That's so true, right? And like the other thing that you just brought up is like inside of that definition of rejection, there's an illusion that like you have a thing, right? Like it could just be you talk like, I hear this all the time, not even meeting, but like someone's texting with somebody, right? That they meet on an app or they meet online and they seem really into them and they ask them out, but they never seal the deal and then they disappear. And they're like, wow, I just keep getting rejected all the time.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it's like, wait, you met up twice, or never. How are you getting rejected? Like someone has to know you to reject you, really. So if someone's like, no, thanks, you're not tall enough, you didn't get rejected. You got filtered out by somebody who has a really shallow filter, or they're really hung up on tall people and it wouldn't have been a good fit. And who cares?
That's brilliant. Right? Like, yeah. I love the idea of a shallow filter.
Yeah, of course. People have shallow filters all the time. There are plenty of times where someone was like, hey, are you interested in this person? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. She's really, you know, tiny, or like, I don't know. I've never dated an Asian girl before. My wife is Taiwanese, whatever. You know, like you could filter someone out like that, and it's your loss. You don't know who they are. You have no clue. You have no clue at all. And so you have a shallow filter. And so if somebody else goes like, oh, I only date guys that are over 6 foot. It's like, well, okay. It doesn't mean you're never going to reproduce. Are you kidding? Well, you really have to be wrapped up in someone else's opinion of you to feel bad about something like that.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other issue, right? So then how do you suggest ladies who are listening manage that rejection, that feeling, that fear? I mean, a lot of them have such a fear of being rejected, they're just not even putting themselves out there.
Oh, yeah. Look, I think that guys reject people for the most arbitrary reasons. When I was single, I remember stopping dating women that I actually liked just because I was like, I'm so busy and it feels like I just feel like I don't have enough energy to entertain this person. Or I'm so deep in my business. I don't have enough free capital to like spend time going out with somebody. Or, I remember not going out with this girl anymore who was super cool because she always liked going to shows and rock shows and going out a lot. And I was like, I never have enough energy to really be a good fit for her because I'm always just so tired after the workday and I just want to lay around on the weekend. I'm so lame. I should just let her go. And she would be like, why don't you like me? And I'm like, because I'm not a good fit for you. Like, I'm boring. You should date somebody who's more interesting. Like she was so interesting and outgoing. I guess she has to say outgoing and social that she made me almost feel bad about myself because I was like, oh God, I'm so boring compared to her. But she never actually said like, hey, you're lame. Why don't you want to go to this show? She was just like, hey, why don't we do this? Hey, why don't we do that? And I was like, hey, Netflix, and she's like, okay. But I could tell that she was kind of like, all right, maybe we'll go out tomorrow night. And then the other night I'd be like, I don't know. I did a lot of work today too. Because she had a 9-to-5 and I was an entrepreneur and it was just kind of a different thing. So it had nothing to do with her. And then there are so many stories like that. Like, I went out on a trip for a week and I came back and like I had so much work to do that I called them and then they were gone for a while because they're a venture capitalist. And then I just was like, it's been 3 weeks. And I know people are like, well, if you really liked him, you would have stayed interested for 3 weeks. No, sorry. You just have so much stuff going on, right?
Right. And also it's your different time of your life, right? Like, so when you met your wife, were you in a place where you were like, had more energy, had more focus, were looking for something more serious, or was it totally an accident?
Yeah, it was exactly that. With guys, I can't remember who told me this, but it was like with guys, some analogy with taxis. Guys have this window that opens up where they're like, yeah, I think I'm ready to like meet someone and settle down. And it has nothing to do with any of the previous women that they've dated most of the time. It's just that like guys could meet somebody who's perfect for them at another time in their life. And they're like, yeah, man, slept with this girl 2 nights in a row, never calling her again. It has nothing to do with her at all. Zero. The guy's just busy. He's up in his career. He's like going traveling all over the place, going skiing with his buddies, doesn't want a girlfriend. And then like 3 years later, you meet the same person and you're like, oh, she's really cool. And that happens a lot. You hear this from my guy friends a lot. Like, yeah, we dated a couple times. Nothing really happened. Hooked up. Then she stayed friends with a friend of mine for a long time. ... We're married and have 2 kids. And you're like, wait, what? And the reason isn't the girl. She's like, yeah, I always liked him. And then the guy's like, yeah, I didn't know that. And of course he's like, oh, if I'd known that. And you're like, no, dude, we were in Vegas like every other weekend. What do you mean if I'd known that? You would have ignored the crap out of her.
That's
we always thought you were an
true. But I have to point out, because some of my ladies are like, yeah, he's in his late 30s. That's when men do that. And it's like, it's not true, because whether men do that in their late 30s or they're doing it in their mid 40s, or they just got out of a divorce in their late 40s and now they're really ready to settle down again because they're in their early 50s. Like, it doesn't really matter the age. It's more like the season in your life. Is that true, do you think, for men?
That it depends on the season of life for guys to settle down?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. That's why you see guys who are from small towns in rural America get married in their 20s, and you see guys that are in their 30s and they're like, I don't know, man, maybe I should start like finding a right girl. And you're like, bro, you're 40. What's happening? Because they live in New York or they live in LA, and it's just like things are different there. So it doesn't really have anything. Guys will say, yeah, I just can't meet the right girl. It's never really the case. If the window's open, generally there's going to be a lot of takers, and so with few exceptions. The only time I see that that's not true are cases like, I've got a friend and he is 39 and he's like, oh, I can never meet the right girl. I want to settle down and get married. And I'm like, okay, what kind of girl are you looking for? And he's like, blonde hair, blue eyes. And I'm like, wait a minute. Guys who are really serious about settling down, they don't say blonde hair, blue eyes. They say nice, close family, wants kids. That's what they start with. They don't start with blonde hair, you know?
So true.
It's kind of a filter. And so whenever he's like, I don't know why I can't meet the right girl, I'm like, how about not giving a crap what color hair or eyes are, first of all, and just like being a little bit more open-minded. He's like, I'm just not feeling it. I'm like, okay, there's something to be said for chemistry, but if your preferences physically are so tight, they're so constrained, I just find it hard to believe that you're actually ready to settle down. I kind of don't really buy it.
I totally, I mean, and by the way, ladies, I have heard that from men who are perpetually single that are in their 40s. Then it's their mid 40s, then it's their late 40s. And that's why I always say the women that we work with are the women that are really confident, that are nice, right? That don't come to the dating experience with their armor up. A really quality guy who's looking to settle down is like, holy shit, like a normal girl, right? Like a nice girl with a big heart who wants to really, really connect. When you were dating, could you tell if someone sort of like had their guard up or they had been hurt before? Was that like obvious to you when you were dating?
Yeah, because it was. And the baggage that was associated with that was really unattractive, actually. And it was also problematic because I remember going out with one gal and she had all these nervous tics and stuff. And I was like, oh, maybe she has some anxiety or something like that. But she just kept going on about other relationships. And I don't mean like a lot, really. It's just there were enough flags where I thought, this is a first date. This is kind of supposed to be about us. I don't really care about all these other things that have happened to you because I don't know you yet. And it was just, I get what she was trying to do. She was trying to be like, hey, I have baggage and you need to be ready for that. I don't want to be ready for that. I want to have a drink, you know, or I want to like go bowling or whatever we were doing. So it was just very strange. And then I remember it was set up by a matchmaker as a favor to my friend who was the matchmaker because I think the girl was about to get like a refund.
Oh, yeah.
And then I remember going, yeah, she's okay. I would give her another shot, but she was a little weird. And then the matchmaker was like, yeah, she's not interested. And I was like, okay, good. And also, what the hell is wrong with this? You know, it's just weird. It was a weird situation because I was kind of like, I didn't really, speaking of rejection, I was just kind of thinking, if only she knew that you literally said, I'll take you out to dinner if you go out with this annoying client that I have, you know, then she might have changed her mind. But I just thought, there's a lot of real dead giveaways when somebody's got a lot of stuff like that going on and they wear it on their sleeve. I don't mind if you have something crazy in your past, like tell me about it at some point, but I don't really want to know on the first date or so. And I know the counter argument is, well, I don't want to waste anybody's time if they're going to screen me out based on this, and this. That's just a defense mechanism. If you can't go out and have fun with somebody without being like, by the way, I had 3 bad relationships and I have this problem. And then this other person was abusive to me. That's not you getting it all out on the table in an appropriate way. That's a defense mechanism because you're trying to sort of have people reject you before you get your hopes up, which is like not a good way to go out on dates and put yourself out there at all.
It's definitely not sexy. Okay, last question for you. You interviewed in your career hundreds, thousands of people maybe, and and all about dating and relationship and brains and all of this stuff. What do you think that you learned in all those interviews that makes you an awesome husband today?
I think all the time about, it's a good question. I think all the time about how our emotions are essentially our subconscious brain trying to tell us things, and about how our brains are fundamentally just sort of like chemical machines, which sounds really unromantic, but it actually works really well. Because whenever I get angry about something, I try to remember like, oh, this isn't about my relationship or it's about something else. And whenever she gets upset or angry about something, I don't go, I can't believe they're acting this way. I'm like, okay, there's this confluence of circumstances. I try to be more analytical about things that are emotional hot buttons, but I also try to enjoy some of the magic of having somebody who creates feelings in you that don't exist elsewhere. And I also realize that a lot of people never communicate those. So whenever I think of something, I know a lot of guys do this. They're like, yeah, my wife, she's so great. She's so awesome. And I always go, when's the last time you told them that? Oh, she knows. And I'm like, why don't you just send her an email with everything you just told me? And they're always like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. That was really good. It meant a lot to her. She printed it out. And I'm just thinking, yeah, your wife, quote unquote, knows that you love her, but it's so nice to hear it sometimes. And a lot of guys, we just don't think about that. Meanwhile, she'll bring us like Funyuns on Sunday. It's like our favorite little thing. And we're like, oh, my wife's so great. And we just sort of keep that to ourselves.
I love that.
And it's like, hey, did you ever think of telling them that? It's like, oh, I said, thanks, love you, babe. And it's like, no. But like you went off on a thing about how she's so kind and caring and generous. You ever tell her that? And the answer is usually no. It's usually no.
It is. And we don't do this all the time, but because of that, my husband and I, every once in a while, we get in this little jam where before we go to sleep, we say, and it's so cheesy, but it's so awesome, especially because men don't really say things. We say, like, what's 3 things I appreciate about you and that I'm grateful for? And literally, it makes all the chemicals in my brain get really happy and horny. So there you go. It's a win-win all the way around.
There you go.
There you go. Jordan, thank you for coming on the show, coming in the dating den. I'm super excited for you. You guys definitely check out the show notes. Listen to the Jordan Harbinger Show. He's amazing. Remember, Larry King, except way cuter, way sexier, and much, much more interesting to listen to, in my opinion. Jordan, we'll talk to you soon. And ladies, don't forget, date with some damn dignity. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, ladies.